Okay. All right. Welcome, everybody. This is episode 15, if you can believe it or not, of the Release the Snyder Cut Round Tables. I am joined this evening by a distinguished panel of guests. We have Noel Ramos. Say hello, sir.
Hello.
We have Bill Garwood.
Good evening, everyone. Happy to be here.
Gio Torres.
Sup, Release the Snyder Cut fam.
And Pili Swain.
Yo, what's going on, everybody?
So I just want to thank all of these gentlemen for hopping on, especially a couple of you guys last minute. We did have our original host for this evening had to bow out, but shout out to the Reasons I'm Broke podcast for originally stepping in to host tonight. But we have a lot of great topics to cover, and we're going to talk about those tonight and kind of gear up for a couple things. So the very first thing, and what's pressing on everyone's minds, it's happening in a few weeks, is DC FanDome. If you've been living under a DC rock as of late, you might not know that DC FanDome is a place for all of the fans to gather together online. It's happening for 24 hours on August 22nd. And you can, go to dccomics.com/DC FanDome and check out all of the great things that are happening there. They're going to announce the slate of DC movies, television shows, whether that be on CW or HBO Max or other platforms as well, with the fate of DC Universe also hanging in the balance there. Right. And we're also going to have some information about comic books coming out as well. So it's the whole gamut of the DC Universe, and we're really excited about all of that. So we're going to be talking about that this evening, as well as speculation about how the Snyderverse could possibly expand into some different territories, including animation. So we're going to talk about that as well. So just to kind of to introduce yourselves to everyone, if you could go around and let the Snyderverse fans know, the Release the Snyder Cut universe know who you are and where they can find you. So Noel, you want to go first?
I'd love to. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
My name's Noel Ramos. I am a longtime comic book artist and huge comic book fan. In my youth, I studied with both Dick Giordano and Frank McLaughlin of DC Comics fame. And it was actually Frank McLaughlin who steered me down a different path. And rather than becoming a comic book artist, I followed in his footsteps and became a graphic designer. So I have him to thank for my 40-plus year career in graphic design, which is kind of cool. And these days, I'm more of a fan than anything else.
Well, I mean, that's a beautiful thing. That's why we're all here. So, thanks so much for joining us. And hopefully, this will be a really interesting episode of the Roundtables for everyone to be a part of. So thank you. How about you, Gio? You want to introduce yourselves or reintroduce yourselves to the Snyderverse?
Yeah, sure. This is my second roundtable, so hopefully you guys know me by now. But Gio, I've been part of the Release the Snyder Cut movement. Not exactly from the beginning, but around there. And we won. We're getting to cut, and now onto the Snyderverse and fighting for that. So I'm excited for this episode.
Awesome. Thanks, buddy. Bill.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Name's Bill Garwood. By day, I am a teacher. By night, I am reading all kinds of comics. Most notably, I'm big into Green Lantern and everything Lantern realm, I guess. I also do Revolutionary War reenacting, and I am a part of our local fandom here in town called South Jersey Geek Fest down here in Woodbury. So if anyone's ever looking to come out there 2 times a year, we do it. It's awesome.
Bill, I did not know that you were a part of Geek Fest. That's awesome, because I go there as a spectator and as a participant. So that's pretty cool. I'll have to make sure I look out.
Oh yeah, it's a fun time. It's the best thing you can do in like this kind of like local kind of con atmosphere. So it's an awesome way to get out there and meet people, especially close by. I mean, it's one thing to go out to San Diego or New York, but you're meeting people who are hours away. Here, you kind of get a little bit more of a local feel for everything. So that's why I really like it.
Hey, Bill, I was sure you were going to say, by night, I'm Batman.
I figured I would leave that one to you. If anything, I would say In Brightest Day and Darkest Night. I would say
Bill, you kind of opened this up. What's your favorite Green Lantern?
My favorite Green Lantern? Good question.
Yeah.
I mean, you gotta love Hal Jordan, but I also really, really like Kyle Rayner, and the early, and this might even springboard us into later discussions, but the early of the animated series, the Justice League, I really liked Jon Stewart.
Oh yeah, he's awesome in that.
Fantastic stuff. Well, thank you, Bill, and welcome aboard. And Pili?
Oh yeah, man. So by day, I do a podcast called Go Deep. Me and Gio, he helps me out with that shit. By night, I am the black version of Batman. So sorry, I took that role already, guys. That's what we do pretty much in the movement. You try to do podcasts and try to get people out of the movement on it, like roundtables and stuff like that. And that's pretty much what I do.
All right. Well, welcome. Thank you so much again for joining us. I appreciate that. And we'll definitely be respectful of the company you're having later. Are you doing anything cool at least around?
Oh, yeah. I'm probably going to have to jump off of here pretty soon, but yeah.
Okay.
Hopefully doing something pretty cool. Hopefully.
Very nice.
Your cat's going for the electrical outlet behind you.
Yeah. He won't be doing anything pretty cool. I might be burying
Anyone seen that scene from Christmas Vacation where the cat gets into the tree and the electricals?
Yeah, I remember that.
You couldn't hear a dump truck drive through a nitroglycerin plant, right? It's funny. These I know like Bill and Noel, like you might not have seen the roundtables before, but our respective cats have all starred in some of these podcasts at one time or another. So, Pili, what's your little buddy's name?
Around here too often then.
Yeah, mine is Simba. He's around here somewhere. Yeah, he's over here now, but he's a weird cat, man. One of my homeboys found him in the back of their apartment, and his girlfriend was like, "Hey, anybody want a cat?" And my kids took it, so now it's kind of just left here.
Oh yeah. There's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah, it's just here, man. It's just I gotta feed it and whatever. But that's the story of Simba.
Pili, I can tell you have a lot of love for Simba.
Yeah, he's like my roommate. The cats don't give a shit, bro.
One day when we're all busy, we're gonna have to have our cats host the podcast. They can do the work, and then we can just do whatever we want.
Pili, Simba's licking the electrical outlet again.
Oh, it's all right, yeah. He'd be all right. So I live on the 3rd floor, right? And he goes outside to his little cat litter or whatever. But there was some birds in a tree right next to my balcony. But there's these eggs in their nest. And when birds have eggs in their nest, they get real, real, real defensive. So every morning he goes out, and they think he's like a threat. So they start coming in like dive bombings. So he, on the 3rd floor, jumps into the tree.
Oh my
God. Goes missing for a week, and he just comes back a week later like, hey. But I didn't know where he was at for the longest. I told the kids, I'm like, yo, dog, we might have to get another animal or something. But then he just shows back up. But now I know because they keep coming out. So now I know it's some little thing with him and the bird. So if he's missing for a week, he's in that tree somewhere.
And then when he comes back, his very first thing out of his little cat mouth is, "Yo, Dad, where's the scrambled eggs?"
Yeah,
he's got a taste for him now.
Yeah. He's lost like 10 pounds. He's walking around here all sad. No, he's all right. He's cool, man.
Well, Pili, welcome Simba. We hope you all have a good time here tonight. My name is Vincent Marone. I go by Vinny. You can find me on Twitter at I am Vinny Marone. As a matter of fact, you can find me pretty much on all socials at I am Vinny Marone. I am a huge DC Comics fan ever since I was a little kid. I am also a music producer and a radio program producer as well. And I'm just very fortunate and lucky to have been able to take part in in these release the Snyder Cut Round Tables and padded blast. So, gentlemen, again, thank you so much for joining. So let's dive in. For those of you who might not have known about it, and for those of you who have known about it, what are you most looking forward to with the DC FanDome? Gio, you want to tell us first?
Sure. So the two things that I'm really like looking forward to, and I feel like we're inching closer to them every day, is that I honestly feel that part of the plan that HBO had put on to like bring in, the film and release it involves doing more with Zack. Like I feel like they sort of have a thirst to do something with these properties, and they've spoken about it, and they did talk about that show, that Green Lantern show that they were going to do with Berlanti, but it just felt sort of like, well, this is the other thing that we're doing, and sort of like they were holding on to something. So I feel like DC FanDome might be an opportunity for them to really expand on what they're going to do. I don't think it's just a film. And the second thing sort of ties into that is that I'm wondering, with more and more actors doing things for these streaming platforms, do we get Batfleck on HBO Max, as the film, as a series, whatever it is? Do we get something like that? That for me is of high interest, and those are the two things I'm really looking forward to.
So Gio, are you a Batfleck fan?
Oh yeah, Batfleck to me is, the way I put it is, when you look at the character of Batman, and they always do the comparison of Batman and Superman. I always think like, Superman puts on the Superman suit, but he's really Clark Kent. That's who he is. And Batman, his suit is being Bruce Wayne. So I really like Batfleck because I felt like he really like embodied that in the way that he showed Bruce. Like his Bruce feels like that's just a cloak that he puts on to sort of hide the darkness that's inside of him. I mean, it helped that the film was the darker version of Batman, but yeah, I loved his portrayal of Batman. I feel like he really nailed that idea, which is something that I really hold on to. So I'm a huge Batfleck fan. He's my number one, and I would say 2 is probably Bale.
Okay. And I know, Noel, I know we spoke a little bit, away from the podcast about your opinion of Batfleck. So I love hearing the differences of opinion. So did you want to kind of chime in about your opinion of Ben Affleck's portrayal as Batman?
Well, I would love to know also about what you feel about Robert Pattinson too.
Oh yeah, boy. Well, I think Ben Affleck's been kind of ill-served by the parts that he's been offered. I mean, his first superhero movie was horrible, and it wasn't his fault. But I don't buy him as Batman, regardless of the storyline behind him as the character, because I kind of feel the opposite of Gio in that he wasn't able to portray Bruce. So you might think of that as, he was portraying the character as wearing a facade of Bruce Wayne, as opposed to Bruce Wayne being this tortured, driven, almost psychotic person who would go to the extremes of putting on this outlandish costume and going out and, fighting crime as a superhero. You think about that duality there, that twisted psyche that's always driven the Batman character from the earliest inception. And that's what I really found fascinating about the character from the get-go. And that's why Batman is my favorite character of all time, actually, because of that character-driven aspect to him that's been prevalent throughout his many iterations over the decades. And I just didn't buy Affleck's version of it at all. It seemed very superficial to me. And I partly blame that on the storylines. He wasn't given the opportunity to play the character any differently.
Yeah, and I could certainly, appreciate that. So Bill, when you hear Gio's side, and then you hear Noel's side, and then you've watched Batman versus Superman. Mm-hmm. And that's really what we have to go on, because, Justice League, where it stands right now, before Zack Snyder's cut comes out, to me, it's not a really accurate portrayal of the arc of that character, right? So judging from Batman v Superman, have you seen the extended cut that's now streaming on HBO Max, or beforehand on Blu-ray?
I have actually not seen the extended cut of Batman vs Superman, anything like that. However, I still really enjoyed Affleck's character and his portrayal as Batman. To me, I'm gonna kind of side with Gio on this. Is that he really portrayed the duality of Bruce Wayne slash Batman very well. So to me, I mean, Bale, I would agree with Noel when he says Bale's probably your favorite. I would agree and say he's like my second favorite, but I think Affleck probably did the best job in portraying those two characters.
I'm going to shock you guys a little bit maybe and tell you that actually Keaton is my favorite.
I didn't hate Keaton at all. I loved Keaton, actually.
Oh, I could see it.
Unpopular opinion. I loved Val Kilmer too.
I really like Val Kilmer.
Now, Pili, obviously, as someone who's like entrenched in the release of Snyder Cut universe, hearing all the different opinions, can you kind of speak to maybe the potential of, maybe kind of serving Noel's wish of getting to expand that arc, that storyline, and showing what that arc was supposed to be, and maybe anticipating a little bit and hopefully getting to see that with an HBO Max special?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I say Ben Affleck was the best Batman, is the best Batman, probably will always be the best Batman. Sorry, Noel. But yeah, I think the BVS Batman, just from what Gio said, how he put like his Bruce Wayne on as a shield, as a cloak for him being a tortured, messed up dude. And I can understand that, because a lot of people do that, like they have a smiley face at work. They got a smiley face with all their friends, but they probably got a little bit of issues going on, So I think I like Batman. Batman is my favorite character on any media, any TV, regardless. But I still think that guy did it the best. And in the future, I think we'll see more, because we're only going up the roller coaster right now. We haven't even Batman vs Superman is still going up the roller coaster. The ride hasn't even started yet, So Ben Affleck.
I definitely think Gio hit the nail on the head when he said that, HBO Max probably has quite a few tricks up their sleeve, and they know what they have in Zack Snyder and his team. And for, for anybody who hasn't seen the ultimate cut of BVS, I just very much urge you to go check it out on HBO Max. Go check out the Blu-ray if you can order one online, or go pick it up, because the theatrical cut really cut out a lot of the meat and potatoes of the story, of those arcs, not just for Batman, but for all of the characters. And a lot of that, as we've talked about on previous episodes, but for those of tuning in who might be new to the release of Snyder Cut movement, a lot of that, those characters were disserviced by by a corporate initiative to be a little bit more like the opposition. And when we're finally getting a chance for the artists who were tasked with bringing these characters to life, whether it be the director or the producers or the actors or the writers or whoever, they're finally getting their chance to bring their vision to the fans. And that's why DC FanDome, I think, is such a beautiful thing, because it takes all of these different mediums. You have film, but now you also have streaming, which has become like a brand new way to consume feature films. You have comic books, you have television on multiple different channels and platforms. So it's a really great opportunity to do that. And I really appreciate you all weighing in with different opinions. One of the things that I wanted to bring up is there was an event that just happened called Justice Con, and I'll just mention it. And I just want to say that the ladies that were in charge of that, and I'm not going to speak to too much more than this, they did just a fantastic job putting that together. If you haven't checked it out, go on YouTube, check out Justice Con, because they had, all the heavy hitters. They had Zack Snyder, they had Deborah Snyder, they had Ray Fisher, who plays Cyborg, who was the heart and soul of Snyder's universe. But they had another guest on there named Sean O'Connell, who's putting out a book about this, the release of Snyder Cut process. And he's one of the heads over at Cinema Blend. And he broke the news that Snyder confirmed that Zack Snyder's Justice League and the Snyderverse is going to be an Elseworlds tale. So, Bill, you mentioned your love of Green Lantern, and there's just so much room for Elseworlds tales to happen in that Green Lantern universe in and of itself. How excited are you to know that Elseworlds could be taken into films and TV and other different medias beyond comic books?
You kind of hit the nail on the head right there. I'm way excited for this. I mean, I don't need to tell anyone here that the Green Lantern film way missed its mark. They shot for the moon, even though it's an intergalactic police force. They shot for the moon with that one, and they looked way too big, as opposed to, as all DC movies are doing right now, they're trying to play a lot of catch up to Marvel, and instead of playing the slow game and building up there, which is why I think the TV shows and the TV series they're doing, Arrow, Flash, things like that, they're working well for DC. Those slow buildups, and me personally, when it comes to Green Lantern, I'd rather see a 4-season story about the core and all the different Green Lanterns and all the different colors. I'd rather see 4 seasons of that than 1 2-hour movie. So I'm super excited to see something like that unfold in this new platform.
Gio, how do you think that whether it's Green Lantern or just Elseworld stories in general, having that ability to kind of shift from one reality to another, from one artist's portrayal to another, how do you think that's going to benefit spanning across all the different platforms that DC now has at its disposal?
I think it allows for sort of like, there's an interesting situation that Marvel's in right now where, they create these TV shows and people, got attached to them, but they had a big issue, trying to, I guess, connect it to what they were doing with the films. And then they'll have like a film, right, within their like sequence of films, and a character might be more exciting than another character, and they want to like spin off and like do all these things, but they can't really, like, they still have to keep it core to what they were doing with that Avengers storyline, because that's a core storyline, right? We see this in comics, right? I mean, Elseworlds is interesting because it allows, a complete sort of turn from what's happening. But again, we see this in comics where the way that things can connect now doesn't have to be so straightforward. It'll allow a situation where, I can have my Batfleck, running around HBO Max, and anyone who's in love with Battison, and I hope he does well. Like, I think he's a good actor, and I'm very interested to see what he does with that. But, let's say that character becomes popular, like that can sort of branch off. We just had Joker. The way that film ended, it was a little bit ambiguous. If they wanted to do more with it, that'd be interesting. Or just the thought of like doing, films driven by villains, and that's just like the what they're going to do. That can just branch off and be its own thing. They were talking about all these like spinoffs that they wanted to do with Wonder Woman. All those things don't need to be connected to whatever the core storyline is. And they can go ahead and like have multiple core storylines too, because on TV they had their multiverse and they had their shows come together, and that was cool the way that they did it. For fans of the shows, that was interesting to see the various shows that they watch connected to each other, and you didn't have to watch all of them to get what they were doing there. So the idea of Elseworlds, the idea of the multiverse, which they already introduced, like, I think it just allows for these studios to sort of give an opportunity to audiences to be like, look, we're not going to connect everything. If you like something, we're going to keep going with it. And that's just how we're going to move forward. So I think it's great. It's no longer a competition between, which version of whatever it needs to be great. Like if Keaton's Batman wanted to keep going, or if they wanted to bring him back, which they kind of rumored at, right? They wanted to bring him back, like that can happen. And I could also have mine. Like, I think that's great. That's just more things for the fans to get whatever they love, which we see in comics right now. So it should be core to how this medium is brought over to film.
Sure. And I can certainly, get behind all of that 100%. So, Noel, I have to go to you just because Gio brought something up. As a student of the game, you studied under a couple of the greats. And obviously, all the way back from the golden age of comic books, all the way up through the 70s and 80s and 90s, we've always seen, different realities kind of converge, into one main storyline, or we've seen, the ability to have, Legends of the Dark Knight, which may not have happened in the typical Detective Comics or Batman arc, but it happened, kind of off to the side, and you can choose to subscribe to that. Does that make you feel a little bit more invested as a fan, knowing that, your favorite Batman, who's Michael Keaton, who I also have a soft spot for, I have to say, and I'm so excited to know that he's rumored to appear in Flashpoint. But does it make you feel a little bit better and more connected with the fandom, knowing that all of them can come together like that?
I've always had a love-hate relationship with the multiverse theory in any kind of science fiction or fiction work. Kind of like time travel, it's one of those things where you're like, oh, that's cool, but then it's sort of cringy, but it's cool, but it's sort of cringy. It's like, it's so easy it's a slippery slope. It's so easy for the story to go south when they start talking about time travel or multiverse. But I think that DC has kind of handled it pretty cool over the years, because to me, as an old school fan, I kind of like the whole Earth 1, Earth 2 thing, where I could still enjoy some of these Golden Age characters and not have to give up my Silver Age characters. I could love them both equally, because they had created this platform for me to do so, the multiverse idea, the Earth 1, Earth 2 thing. So in that respect, as a true fan, I really enjoy it. But then they started getting crazy with it, and between Marvel and DC duking it out with this multiverse thing, they're up to like 4 billion different worlds now, and so many different iterations of these characters. It just becomes a little bit mind-boggling. So I suffer from being overwhelmed by it at times. And I'm not even a full-time fan anymore. I don't buy comic books anymore like I did when I was younger, and I don't read them as often. Sometimes I'll read them online a little bit, but I don't stay as in tune with it as I did when I was younger, and I'm still overwhelmed.
That's definitely very fair. And the last thing for me as a fan that I would want other fans to feel, because really at the end of the day, it's all about coming together like we are today, right? And talking about the things we love. The last thing I would want to do is make a fan feel alienated just by all of the different options. But Pili, like for you as someone, now you've been with the release of Snyder Cut movement. When did you kind of come on board with that? When were you aware of that happening? Oh, you might want to come off.
Let me unmute me. Yeah, I think it was like in 2016, but I was around, but I just didn't do anything. I was kind of just hanging out in the background and learning and, kind of seeing what was going on. But Fiona brought me into the Snyder Cut movement. So all right, so check this out. If you look at like my podcast, Go Deep, it talks about like a lot of this shit, time travel, space travel, aliens, all that stuff. I kind of think the world is ready for it, bro. I think, maybe in 2016 we wasn't ready for time travel, and then like multiverse and quantum physics and all that stuff. And then when Marvel did it, they still didn't know how to explain it, and they were like, "Oh, it's quantum physics stuff." And then, but I think Zack Snyder I think he's gonna do it right, So I think the world is ready for it. You see, we got this, now they're talking about UFOs in mainstream media. So we got Zod landing, we got alien invasions, we got multiverse. I'm with it all, bro. Bring it. It gives me more content to talk about on my podcast.
Exactly, man. And you brought up a good point about us not being ready, and I think that really speaks to just we as humanity, as a society, we go through these cycles of consciousness or being ready for being involved with different things. And I think that's why your Batmans and your Supermans, your Wonder Womans, your like they all appeal to us because, and I think Zach really kind of unlocked that with us, is that they're all mythological beings, right? So you can take these mythological beings and you can place them in any time frame, in any era in history. And the core of who they are as a character can really apply to those times, and they can speak to those times. And I think that's the really cool thing about, being able to deliver these Elseworlds type stories, to have a multiverse, so that you can have these characters that we can all identify with, those very elemental traits in them. But at the same time, those elemental traits can respond to something that we're relating to individually or as a society in the time that we're in. And I think that that's a beautiful thing, and I welcome that as a fan, you know.
Yeah,
and like you said too, Pili, like just I'm ready too, man.
bring it on, girl.
bring on Zod and the aliens, man. I'm
know,
ready,
right?
because I think, you know, we're all a little bit more, you know, aware of different possibilities and
Right.
and having a collective consciousness. So it really does make more sense for everyone to kind of take all these different schools of thought. So even if you thought of Keaton Batman as one school of thought, if you thought of Christian Bale Batman as one school of thought, Ben Affleck, so on and so forth, and you have fans of those individuals, it's really time for all of those different schools of thought now to come together, right? And to move forward in society and to kind of grow in that way. So I think it's a really good ideology and a way for kind of art to mimic what's happening in real life, or vice versa, you know.
Yeah,
Speaking
no, it is. Oh, my bad. Who's that?
I was just going to point out, speaking of Keaton's Batman, I have a strong feeling in my gut that Pattinson is going to pull a Keaton on us, and he's going to be amazing.
Oh, I believe so too. Absolutely.
I wouldn't doubt it.
I mean, I never thought he wasn't going to be. His statements about like not training and stuff are like weird, but he's such a good actor. Like, I think that he'll be able to like put something together, and I think it's going to be different than what we're like. I don't think he's going to go out there and like recreate something that we've seen before. So I think, like, you know, I mean, he'll do something that's good from like an objective standpoint of like acting. I think. Is it a good Batman? That's a different question, I think.
I think it's going to be a good Batman.
Oh, okay. All right.
I mean,
that car looks a little crazy, though. No? That Batmobile?
He should learn how to ride a motorcycle.
Yeah.
Sorry, I had to do that. I can't even ride a bike. I can't even ride a bicycle. It's okay.
I was just
go ahead.
My point about Keaton was that, like so many others who were looking forward to the movie when they started talking about creating it, we heard that Michael Keaton, a comedian, was going to play Batman. All the Batman fans were up in arms, upset about the idea. Michael Keaton can't be Batman. He's a freaking comedian. It'll never work. And then we saw the movie, and he blew us away. And I immediately became a massive Michael Keaton fan because of that film. And he's never disappointed. Even when he played in the Spider-Man movie, he was amazing. So, you know, everything I've seen him in since then, Beetlejuice, I mean, he's just been incredible. So, you know, I think Pattinson's going to do the same thing to us. I'm not a Pattinson fan because Twilight can go, you know. But I think that he's going to shock us with an amazing portrayal of the Batman. That's my sense of it.
I love it. I dig it. It's all about.
That's interesting. I forget that people still remember Pattinson as like the Twilight guy, because I never saw the Twilight movies. But like I saw Robert Pattinson from Good Time and like the little indie stuff that he's been doing in the last like few years. That's really like where I got to know him. So like I don't really know him through like the Twilight movies. I honestly never seen him, but
I will always know him as Cedric Diggory.
Yeah.
He will always be Cedric Diggory to me.
Is that his name in the movie?
Well, he was in Harry Potter in the
Goblet of Fire. Right. He's in Harry Potter. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, well, and Noel, I agree, man. I see. I love Batman as a character. Really plays well to like the pulp style storytelling in general, whether it's in a visual medium or with books or comic books and things like that. And that's where we're going to kind of talk about how the medium of animation could kind of help the craving for Snyderverse fans to continue moving forward. And this is a hotly debated topic, but I think it's a very good one to talk about. So one of the things I wanted to get Bill's perception on this, because you're a huge Green Lantern fan. You mentioned the Ryan Reynolds helmed Green Lantern film from a few years ago, and there's no denying that there's been rumors that Ryan Reynolds' Green Lantern was actually set to appear in the Snyderverse. Now, whether or not that's true, it's one of the rumors that have gone around. How would you feel about seeing that Green Lantern redeemed through the Snyderverse, possibly in live action or even through animation or some other medium that would be able to kind of take what you were disappointed by as a fan and kind of redeem that.
Sure. And I think this kind of ties in with the discussion that we were just having about actors and how their abilities and their way that they can portray a character really saves, or at least tries to save as much as they can, a failed story or a failed execution of a vision. And with something with like Green Lantern, it's tough to do in a live action because this is something that's intergalactic, a lot of green lights, flashes, things like that, which you're almost going to be relying almost entirely on CGI. I wouldn't hate to see it in an animated version. I wouldn't hate to see it at all. I would hope that someone like Ryan Reynolds would want to reprise that character, whether it be live action or a voiceover, because I thought he did a great Hal Jordan. I really enjoyed him as Hal Jordan. I think now, though, anyone sees him as a character, as a superhero character, I think they're automatically going to go to Deadpool. So I don't know if you might need to begin anew with that character. My biggest concern with an animated Snyderverse is if we can accurately convey like the darker and edgier side, like a Snyderverse is, in an animated medium.
And I think that's a fair concern. And before I go to Pili, I want to get your opinion on that. But before I wanted to kind of weigh in on that as well. So I, unlike many DC fans, I'm not a huge fan of the way that the DC animated universe has kind of unfolded over the last several years. And I know that I'm in the minority with that. But I personally just don't feel it. I guess they kind of took the New 52 style of animation and character portrayal, and they kind of really went all in with that. And I really just don't like how they have adapted some of the more seminal storylines to fit their narrative. And I kind of don't like the way that they're produced. That's just my personal opinion. It seems a little bit too, I don't want to say hokey. That's a terrible word to use when you're talking about somebody who puts their heart and soul into something like an animated film. But for me personally, you're right, Bill, like being able to put that darker spin in what is currently put out there as the DC animated product right now would be almost impossible. So Pili, for you, as someone who's part of the Snyder Cut movement and knowing that dark tone is what drives you as a fandom, how would you like to see that portrayed in animation form?
All right. I would, two things. It can be done because remember HBO did it like in the 90s with Spawn. Remember Spawn? It was an animation and that shit was dark as hell, you know, but I wouldn't want to see it. I want to see Zack Snyder's movies because his movies is like Zack Snyder. J.J. Abrams, everybody else can go to animation if they want to, but I want to see Zack Snyder's verse and everybody else branch off of his stuff. I don't want to see it like, he's just Elseworld now, because no, he kind of made this. He started this. So now I kind of want everybody else to be Elseworld. Like Pattinson, get the hell out of here. Everybody else get the hell out of here too. Shazam, all of these guys get the hell out of here.
Oh, come on.
I only want to see, what Zack started. I don't want to see any of this like Jeff Johns greenlit stuff. Nah, not a, or any compromise like, hey, can we do animation now? Or can we do 165? Or, I mean, we can, but I'll watch it, but nah. I want to see like 300 movies, like BVS, I'll watch Spawn or I'll watch some animation shit, but that's not what I'm looking for,
And that's completely respectful. And to your point, Zack is known for being, for bringing those visuals to life in his way, right? So, his story is one thing, getting to execute that arc is one thing, but really his way of storytelling is through his visuals.
Right.
The way that he frames a shot or, sound design or whatever.
Look at 300, that scene where they're slow motion and they're just killing everybody, going like spinning around. If you see that in animation, it'll be like, hey, that's great, but it won't be 300. You know what I'm saying? You won't see it the same way because when it's slow motion at extra high def and you can see like blood droplets and all this other crap, you can see that in animation, but it's gonna look like Spawn. You know, it's like, hey, Spawn again. You know.
What about you, Gio? Do you think that venturing down the path for the Snyderverse's sake, down the path of animation, and I only bring this up because Mark Hughes, who's been a very avid supporter of the Snyder Cut, who writes for Forbes, and he does a lot of other stuff too, but he just recently published an article on Forbes about the potential of the Snyderverse coming to animation. How do you feel about that, being such an avid supporter of the movement?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest with Mark Hughes's take sometimes. Like, I feel like, I mean, just with my history in the movement, take it with a grain of salt. But let's take my bias out of that and say, all right, if we're looking at animation, right, the way I even read that was sort of like, so, you know, we're definitely getting the Snyder Cut. We're definitely getting Justice League. There's $30 million rumored that are going to be invested into it, right? So if you think about that film, the one that we've been fighting for, I think, unfortunately, what we're going to see on HBO Max isn't the one that, like, during SnyderCon last year, he was like, it's finished, 214 minutes. Just on the fact that, like, he said it's finished, and now he's not, like, I don't think Zach lied about it. So obviously he's editing something to it. And when you think about it, what is he editing, right? Like, what is he doing to it? What did Zach agree to do to his film when he was so adamantly against, and this whole movement is about him not editing the film, right? So I think what's happening is that film existed in a time and space where they were going to make a follow-up to it. And he was asked to sort of like make compromises at that point in time, you know, for the other films that were part of, you know, what DC was doing. So they wanted to go ahead and spin off into an Aquaman and go ahead and spin off into a Shazam and do all this stuff, right? So he had to create an avenue for that, and he had to tone things down. I think that $30 million and what he's doing into that film is to sort of get back to what he originally wanted to do. So when I think of like what animation would do for the Snyderverse, I think you know, going back to this comic book analogy, right? I think that what he's going to do to Justice League is sort of make it this contained space. That is what he wanted to do. If you think about all the God shirt and like the octagon that he showed there and all that, I think he's going to get very close to that. I don't know if he finishes that. I don't know if like 30 million is enough to like do what he wanted to do for 2 films, right? But I think that's that main line. I think when they're talking about animation, you know, we had Suicide Squad that did spin off of what Snyder was doing. So I think that they're talking about like doing more things within the realm of what Snyder created. They don't want to get rid of Snyder's verse, right? There exists things like, you know, the world has changed based off of what happens in that movie. So they want to do stuff. And in that case, like, I think it's cool. Like, I think animation does have the ability to keep this tone. I think one of the darkest movies I've ever seen is this movie called Perfect Blue. It's this anime from like the 90s. And that film like it's like psychologically dark. So I think that they can do stuff, you know, that is dark in animation, do something very interesting. I know that Zach has a lot of ties. I mean, he works with Jay Oliva, which you're based on your comments on what you felt about the animated films in DC. I asked you to go back and look at which ones you'd liked and didn't like from there, because you didn't do all of them, and I feel like you might have liked some of the J ones, because there's a bit of a difference between the ones he did and didn't do. So
yeah,
like,
don't get me wrong, there's definitely ones that I really do feel like stand out, but I think that the ones that they kind of regularly pump out to meet that deadline, those are the ones that get a little cringy for me.
Hey, Vinny.
Yeah.
Yo.
Can we backtrack just for a minute, because I'm hearing what Gio was just saying has me a bit confused, because from my understanding, Snyder had to bow out of post-production because of the death of his daughter, and Joss Whedon took over, and that's when all of the bad stuff happened to the film. I don't think it happened during production.
Can I pick this up?
Well, let me finish my thought. Earlier, you guys, I think it was Vinny who mentioned that Cyborg is like the center of the Snyderverse, and Cyborg was the least. He got treated the worst in that movie in terms of the unfinished CGI and just the horrible effects. So I don't think what we saw in the theater had anything to do with Snyder. I think had been wrested from his control at that point.
100% different. The movie, Snyder's movie is going to be 100% different.
Yeah, so at Justice Con last week, actually, Noel, he said that basically any shot that Whedon added to the film, that's not in the Snyder Cut at all. So when you look at the Justice League movie that came out, I want to say, that was a 2-hour movie. You probably will only see like 40 minutes of it, because 40 minutes is what we've sort of pushed back, like how we're able to like track back to things that Snyder did. And then the rest of it, like you can tell, whenever you see, Henry Cavill's face and it's CGI'd, obviously that's something that Snyder didn't shoot, that's a reshoot. When you see, Ben Affleck bloated, that's, because of what he was going through at the time. So you can visually trace what things were added. But then Noel, also to answer your question around where he left in post-production. So Snyder actually left really far into post-production. The way that Snyder shoots his films is that he doesn't really do reshoots, because the way that he shoots is like he'll do all these storyboards and that's what he's shooting. So his reshoots are more like the first time that they caught it, it just didn't work out like how he wanted to do in the storyboard. And when he's going into editing, he had to go back. But he essentially has some sort of version that he could use. It's just like not ready. And then also when you think about it, it was this big film that was supposed to come out that got delayed on release. So he was way farther into post-production than he should have been able to have released the film at the time that he left. Like it was supposed to come out that May, and I think he left May, right? Something like that.
Well, that was Warner Brothers sticking their fingers into the whole mess and dragging it out and forcing change.
Yeah. And then when I speak about the changes, so the film was actually written at the same time as Batman v Superman. So, at that time, they sort of had an idea of where they wanted to go with Justice League. So when they went and started to storyboard Justice League, because they were far enough into Batman v Superman to start working on Justice League, that's when they already had the opportunity to get some feedback on Batman v Superman. People were already like, oh, this is too dark. So that's when Warner Brothers sort of came in and like asked them to do things a little bit differently. And they went in and changed stuff from their original script. So what I'm saying now is that with this 30 million, is he going back to his original script prior to him having to change things based off of the reaction of Batman v Superman? Because that happened way far into the production of the movie.
Yeah, that would be my guess.
Yeah.
From what I'm gathering, this is his original vision. So
right.
That's what I would hope for.
Right. And that would make sense that he's okay with going back and editing the film, because he gets to go back to what he originally wanted to do.
Yeah, and Noel, just to kind of give you an idea, and I know that this roundtable discussion back on episode 14, they kind of did a little bit of a recap of Justice Con, but a direct quote from Zach during his panel at Justice Con was, "I would set it on fucking fire before I use a single frame of that movie." So, and to kind of speak on what Pili said, like you're going to see, if you recognize anything in.
Hey guys, I think I got to run.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us, man. We hope to be able to talk to you soon.
Yeah, appreciate it. Gio, I was trying to leave earlier, but he just talked so much, man. I just got
because you never get me on your pod. Come on. You're probably giving me the opportunity to talk.
Hopefully we can get back together, man.
Later.
Yeah,
I'll plug Go Deep.
Yeah, please do. And when we put it out, I'm gonna follow all you guys on Twitter so we can probably do something like this again.
Absolutely. Right, cool. I would love it.
All right,
Pili. Have a great night.
That's great. Have a great night.
Peace, yo.
Yeah, but to circle back around that and what you were saying, Noel, and what Gio was speaking to, it's very much going to be about restoring his vision. To speak on what you were talking about, Gio, where so the narrative for, I know for Noel and even for Bill, right? You had said that you weren't really close to the situation when BVS was released. And then for any new viewers or listeners who might be joining Release Snyder Cut podcast now, who are new viewers and listeners, the way it kind of worked was, WB invested in Zack Snyder at the request of Chris Nolan, who had that really ridiculously successful trilogy of Batman films. And Nolan was pretty much handing the reins over to Zack Snyder. And this was before they brought Jeff Johns on to kind of be, the Kevin Feige of DC. They really invested in Zack's vision, not just for Superman with Man of Steel, but for the entire DC universe. So when he wrote Man of Steel, that was, I guess, as close to his pure vision as you can possibly get. But once he got into Batman v Superman, the way that it worked out is right around that time, Avengers, had come out in theaters, and DC wanted some of that Marvel money. And, we had spoken about offline, that it was a lot darker in tone to what, DC had, I guess, anticipated. So they went back and they made revisions even before BVS was released. And that's why you got the theatrical cut, which is kind of disjointed. It's kind of all over the place. There's missing story. There's missing meat and potatoes. So you kind of feel like you're jumping around. I remember leaving the theater after BVS and being like, that the movie was beautiful. The performances were stellar, but that story just seemed so disjointed. And then you find out later that it was because the studio went in and intervened and pulled a bunch of stuff out. And then at that point is when, like Gio had stated, they went in and Zack Snyder and Chris Terrio had a script ready for Justice League, and it was supposed to be a 2 or even 3-part trilogy of films to tell that arc. And they went in and they dismantled the whole thing, and they told him that he had to kind of, start over and figure something else out. So I think that the Zack Snyder's Justice League that we're getting I don't think it's going to be quite that original vision that he and Terrio worked on. But I also don't think that we're going to have to worry about any other kind of encumbrances, basically, so that he's going to get the most out of his vision as possible. That's what I believe. All
right, then I have a question for you. If it's not going to be his original vision, then what do you foresee him doing with what he's got, and where is he going to go with it?
I mean, I think that, after he had made the concessions that he had to make after BVS, and that he came to an agreement in the story that he was happy with, I think that's really what he wants to deliver, and kind of deliver something to his fans who have stuck by him, have supported him. The death of his daughter was, something that, for me personally, I could never imagine having to go through myself. But his fans really rallied behind him and have raised countless amounts of money for suicide prevention and awareness. And I think for him at this point, it's a completion of something that he set out to do a few years ago, but also a thank you to the fans for keeping the memory of his daughter alive and for keeping the movement going and believing in him and giving them something that they invested their time and energy into and what they expected from him as a director. And that's, for me, that's really all I can ask for as a fan. So, I know that Pili had said that, seeing it go into an animated style universe really wouldn't be ideal for him. And I can totally see that. If Zack Snyder is giving you a movie, you expect a certain thing, visually, story-wise, whatever. But for me, personally, I think that if it's treated properly, if the tone is key, if that's the centralized focus point, and they're able to take these characters and these stories that Zack had kind of brought to the table and their visions and expanded that with an animated universe, I would love to watch it.
I think what he was saying, and I think Gio even touched on this, was more like have Zack Snyder's Snyderverse be the main trunk of the tree, and that these animated things be little offshoots that come out because they're quicker and easier and cheaper to do. So, hey, we had a great idea based on this. Let's throw it together as an animated version, which I think would be really cool, because that, animated films and short films are faster, cheaper, and easier to produce, and you can throw a lot of ideas out there that you just couldn't afford to experiment with in an actual live production. So from that perspective, I would agree with them both that would be cool.
Yeah, and I think when you think about, sorry, I think when you think about the main trunk and what Zach's going to finish off and what sort of like, I think what we're talking about is how that third act goes really. So I think that third act went one way when there was supposed to be a Justice League 2, and it was part of the main DC line, and they were going to have studio money, and it was going to go in that direction. I think what we're going to see is that, personally, I felt at the end of Batman v Superman that the film ended. Like you saw that movie. It had an end. It had an ability to move forward and things to happen. And they mentioned like, oh, something's coming. But the story that you were given and presented that ended and that wrapped up. I think the same thing is gonna. I think that's what that 30 million is going into Justice League for. Like that movie will end, and maybe before it didn't end that way because it was already announced that it had a follow up to it. So I think it'll end, and then that sort of then. They'll see how it does in HBO Max. And is the future of it something that they, people have an appetite for, but they don't have a full $200 million budget appetite for? Maybe. Or maybe it's something, and that's where they go and venture off into continuing it in animation. But I think that's what they're looking at because, again, it's different budgets that you're working with, and it's a different system altogether. It could lead to another, like a series. And that's something that they've discussed, like whether Justice League is a series, and they turned that into like a bunch of different episodes. Although I've always seen that more like sort of what they did with the Hateful Eight, where like, you can't just drop a 5-hour movie on a streaming platform and expect the regular world to watch it. So you might have to break that up into parts because, that's just the nature of the beast with how that works. And they'll sit there and watch the 5 hours, but for some reason they just need it to be episodes, and they're not really episodes. They're just numbered for some reason. So right. It might just be that. Yeah.
And Bill kind of spoke that a little bit earlier, right? Bill, like in wanting to see, some of these more involved stories told in episodic formats because it would be easier to consume. It would be easier to kind of like digest the information that you just got with one episode and go into the other.
And if I might interject for just a minute, being the old schooler here, when you think about the entire history of comic books, they were always episodic. They have their roots in Pulp Fiction. They were always serialized, and that's what we love about them. So I think that's intrinsic to the art form, and so it's kind of important to me anyway that it be there in some form or another.
Absolutely. And Bill, going back to like we've kind of joked third, through osmosis, I guess, in the past that we kind of, we should be best friends at this point because of all the things we have in common. Are you a Star Wars fan? And I know it might be a dirty word around the Snyder Cut.
No, I'm a huge Star Wars fan. In fact, I just recently found out that this podcast is really involved with their cats too. My cat's name is Kenobi.
Okay, yeah. Well, my cat's name is Kylo Ren, so we have Kenobi and Kylo Ren.
Even more connections there.
So I'm guessing that you've seen The Mandalorian, and there's no question. I mean, I don't think anybody who's listening or watching this podcast can deny that series was executed so well. It was such an amazing series.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where
comparison.
Yeah. So like Gio was saying, you might not have big budget money to tell these stories. Do you think that the Snyderverse can continue, maybe not in animated form, but in a form similar to what we saw with The Mandalorian?
So I'm going to kind of touch off of what Noel said too, is being the purist, like we're used to seeing these comics coming in like an episodic form. Why not tailor that and transfer that into a visual media where you might have an episode coming out every month, just like you have a comic book coming out every month. But in between those comics or those episodes in the off season, we'll call it, I guess, you might have those crossovers. You might see Flash dealing with Batman or Superman and Green Lantern teaming up to go on the outer space or something like that. I would love to see that because again, with the episodes and with having seasons, it gives you more of a range to play with the character. You can take them off into totally different, 6 different scenarios at once almost, and allows you to really develop the character, I think, better than a movie could.
And you have to also take into account all the different multimedia we have now, where in between those monthly episodes, you could have webisodes.
Exactly.
Or, some sort of online interaction with those characters. So that would also keep the story going, and it would give the audience members a little cool thing to latch onto in between each one of those episodics.
Yeah, I agree with you, Noel, and that's kind of like what I've been saying myself as a fan, is that, you know, you have all of these different mediums to play up to, and there's been so much division in fandom in general, whether it's with DC or with Star Wars or with any other kind of fandom. You know, now's the time, you know, to start rallying people together. You know, we're all fans for a reason. You know, why not all rally together? You know, show our love, show our support, because these artists, they pour their heart and souls into these characters that we all love. And, you know, maybe we don't agree with the way that they've portrayed them in their medium, but there's another medium for us to go to and watch the ones, or read the ones that we do love. And I think that that's important for artists to keep their integrity, to keep their stories alive. You know, because obviously the stewards and the chaperones of these characters, obviously DC and Warner Brothers, they've entrusted these artists with them anyway. So they did it for a reason, and I would love to see, you know, those come to fruition. So I am going to wrap it up here, gentlemen. I know that Gio, this is the first time we've met, and I'm glad that we did. But I know in your bio on Twitter it says that you're a whiskey enthusiast.
Yes.
And I have to admit that I partook in a little bit too much of some whiskey a little bit earlier today. So
I'm actually on an alcohol fast until the 20th. So I'm drinking my little spindrifts.
There you go. We visited a friend earlier today, and I went to the store, the adult beverage store beforehand.
Yeah.
Kids watching this, you know, wait until, you know, you're of age to go there. But they had this really cool bottle of bourbon, and it was kind of fat at the bottom and got skinny up at the top. It kind of looked like a genie bottle, and I'm like, I need to buy this. The original plan was, you know what? I have a photo of it. I'll have to share it with you. I don't remember.
Yeah, send it to me. I love bourbon. Like, bourbon is my bourbon is my whiskey of choice.
Is it Willett Pot Still Reserve?
I've seen that. Is it good?
Yeah. Oh, it was good. It went down pretty smooth. Yeah. I mean, I like some of the more biting stuff personally, but I thought it was pretty smooth, and I recommend it to those who are not.
I'm a bourbon fan, and I really love Bullet. Like, Bullet is my go-to. I just feel like Bullet is great in anything.
Yeah.
Ice, no ice, wherever you want to put it, I'll take it.
Absolutely, man. Well, you know, to catch little tidbits like that about Gio over on Twitter, Gio, if you can kind of give just a little snapshot again of where people can find you later on.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm on Twitter at B_I_NGIO. It's like the song Gio, like this. But also
NGO.
Since Pili left, I have to make sure I plug the podcast. So I work with Pili on the Go Deep podcast. It's his show. I just help him, you know, put some shows together. But you know, check us out there. It's a great. I really like the podcast, and I started working with him because, you know, we're always bringing in, besides the aliens and that talk, which is fun, and you should definitely check that out. I love it. But we're always bringing in new people from the movement. So I'm sure he's going to reach out to you guys. I want to do one-on-ones with you. Pili is great about doing interviews. You know, so I really like the show. It's a good opportunity to come on and let us know if you ever want to be on and stuff like that. So check us out on that podcast. Yeah, I will reach out since I have you on DM now.
Cool.
Cool. But yeah, check us out there. And yeah, that's it. I've, you know, been part of the movement, and you know, I'm always available on Twitter, always ready to talk about stuff, and, you know,
awesome.
Looking forward to DC FanDome.
Well, I appreciate you being on today, man. It was really great to get to talk to you. And Noel, I know that we spoke offline, and I just want you to know, like, the release of Snyder Cut FanDome, man, we're artists of all kinds. So pretty please tell Release of Snyder Cut FanDome where they can find you on your day-to-day, and how they can touch base with you through your gift of music, because I'm going to do the same.
Yeah, we're hoping to have you perform for us, Vinny, so I'm looking forward to that.
Absolutely.
We're going to definitely be checking out your music. My Facebook group is the IMC.FB group. It's the Independent Music Conference, and you can find me at groups/IMC.FB on Facebook.
Perfect. Well, thank you, man. And again, for the last minute, you know, you coming on here and lending your expertise, especially like I said, studying under under some really amazing people who've been in comic books over the years, man. Like having this discussion with you has been incredible, and I really appreciate it.
Can I just say one thing to Bill before we go real quick?
Absolutely.
I think that Reynolds' Green Lantern was highly underrated, and I think that film and his portrayal get a lot of flack for unjust reasons. I actually thought the movie was not that bad, and I thought that if anything saved that movie, it was his portrayal of the character.
I'll agree with that, but I'm thinking that's the bourbon talking, man.
I don't. If there's anything to save of that movie, it was Reynolds' portrayal of Hal Jordan for sure.
Also, Mark Strong was a great Sinestro, and it's so sad that like I don't think he can come back because now he's Dr. Whatever. I don't know.
No. They're gonna have to reboot it. They're just gonna have to.
I know, but he was such a great Sinestro.
You delved right into Parallax right from the get-go. And don't even get me started on it.
We're going to have a Green Lantern-centric podcast when all of this stuff comes to fruition at DC FanDome, because I have a feeling we're just going to get a ton of cool information there. So, Bill, I know that you're involved in so many cool things. Do you have anywhere where folks can reach out to you and maybe continue the conversation or find you if they want to, have you come later?
Sure. I mean, I don't have a Twitter, but I do have Facebook. You reach me at Bill Garwood Facebook. Search up on South Jersey Geek Fest on Facebook as well. I think our next event it was postponed until October. So hopefully we'll be able to get out and running. We're at the Woodbury Heights Recreation Center out there. Again, it's that Comic-Con feel, but in like a small town vibe. So everyone is within 5-10 miles away from you. So it's really cool opportunity to meet some like-minded people in a closer knit community.
And as a Jersey guy, I can personally vouch for that. I mean, Bill is not kidding when he says that. It's really an incredible event, and there's amazing artists there. A lot of the times, great vendors. It's great vibes. So definitely check out Geek Fest. It's awesome.
How far is that from the city?
From the city,
15,
you're probably
20
only
minutes?
like 20, 25 minutes.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, it's not far at all.
Oh, because you said South Jersey. I was like, all right.
Oh, wait. Well, so which city are you you
yeah,
got the Yankees
Oh,
at?
so,
You're talking about that other
Like
city.
an hour and a half away.
It's a little farther from that other city. But we're not going to talk about that city. Not in this podcast, anyway.
Great start to the season, guys.
Wow. Let's not get started on that. I'm glad they were all, Anyway, so my name is Vinny Marone. You can find me all over social media: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, at I am Vinny Marone. My typical gig is I'm a music enthusiast, I guess you could say. I produce music, I produce radio shows, I produce all kinds of fun stuff. I wrote a book. If you want to go check that out on Amazon, it's called How a Phoenix Learns to Fly. And you can find my music at Bandcamp, so you can type vincentmarone.bandcamp.com and check me out there. But I would love to continue the conversation with anybody. So anybody in the comment section of this YouTube video, please leave your comments. Like, share, and subscribe. We would love to hear from you again in the future. Follow us all on Twitter. We'd really love to continue this. So gentlemen, again, thank you so much for joining us. Episode 15 of Release the Snyder Cut podcast, the Round Tables. I mean, it's been an epic thing. So gentlemen, I hope I see you all again sometime down the